A very good day to everyone and especially to Dr. Asak. Today my team and I are going to present our chosen current issues topic, which is educational psychology, specifically regarding childhood abuse. Childhood abuse has been in existence for centuries, also known as child maltreatment. It is a state of emotional, physical neglect, sexual maltreatment, or other exploitation meted out to a person aged less than 18 years old. It is a cause of childhood morbidity in terms of its impact on physical health and disability, emotional health, life development, and their education. Children are the most criminally victimized people in the world, as child maltreatment has been widely prevalent in all societies. Childhood abuse adverse long-term effects on both boys and girls, not limited to the individual child victim, but also society from its effects on family, psychosocial consequences, juvenile delinquency, substance abuse, and crime. According to global data by UNICEF, more than 1 in 4 children worldwide reported having experienced severe and frequent physical abuse, while child sexual abuse was experienced by nearly 1 in 5 females and 1 in 11 males. World Health Organization estimated that approximately 31,000 children below age of 15 died due to homicide. Clinical studies show that significant number of adult victims with eating disorders, borderline personality, sexual dysfunction, depression, and those who are diagnosed with multiple personality disorder are to have history of sexual molestation during their childhood. So what do the victims go through? They are beaten by family members, bullied and attacked by schoolmates, abused and raped by dating partners, silenced by the perpetrators, and targeted by sex offenders in both physical and virtual realms. So discussion about ensuring children's right to protection is seldom fully addressed in Malaysia. An old Malay saying goes biar mati anak jangan mati adat, which means to let go of a custom is far worse than to let go of a child. This saying reflects the high value that Malaysian culture attaches to customs and customary practices, and also shows the way that it looks at the children. Horoscope indulgence among the Chinese community and astrological beliefs by among Indian Malaysia may also result in bias and abuse of children. Due to cultural perspective, being raped or abused may lead to social discrimination and cultural taboos of losing face, especially for ladies, as society will judge them as weak. Considering the social stigma and attitudes of Malaysian public, most cases of child abuse go unreported. Statistics from Sexual Crimes, Domestic Violence and Child Abuse Investigation Division of Malaysia indicate that children aged between 1 to 7 made up the highest number of abuse cases. Statistics of Malaysian Royal Police showed that the majority of perpetrators are biological fathers, stepfathers, or another relative, which is the main reason for the unreported cases. Since the introduction of Child Act 2001 of Malaysia, medical doctors, teachers, family members, and child care providers are subjected to mandatory reporting a child who is physically or emotionally injured as a result of being mistreated, neglected, abandoned, or who is sexually abused to the social welfare officers or police. The National Child Protection Policy of Malaysia that has been implemented since July 2009 is a good standard of practice to look out for all who is concerned with the safety of children. Child abuse is an offence in Malaysia. Offenders may be liable to a maximum fine of 50,000 ringgit or up to 20 years imprisonment, or both depending on the offence. They may also be punished with whipping in addition to the fine and imprisonment, or either one.
Hi, my name is Nick Nurahana, and I'll be talking on the global perspectives of childhood abuse. So, abuse and maltreatment towards children happens to millions of children worldwide, and issues regarding this particular social problem are relatively similar across most countries. However, countries tend to vary quite significantly in terms of how they define, prevent, and treat childhood abuse and neglect, and this is largely due to cultural factors. So cultural factors come into play, and I'll be talking about it more in the next part. So as I've mentioned earlier, the cultural context of the country plays a large part in how child abuse is defined, prevented, and treated. So, for instance, countries are in a very constant strive to create definitions of abuse and neglect within their cultural context. So, they struggle essentially to make distinctions between acceptable discipline and child rearing practices and inappropriate practices that constitute as abuse towards the child. So this means what can be considered abusive practice in one country may not be considered abusive practice in another country. An easy example that I can give is that this would be the case in many Asian countries where corporal punishment is rather common, although there has been some shifts in this area in recent years. I believe that more countries in Asia are starting to realize the actual detrimental effects that corporal punishment can have on children. So I move on to talking about the international laws on childhood abuse and neglect in certain countries. For this, I'll be talking about two countries in particular, which are Sweden and Brazil. So in Sweden, they have what they call the Swedish Penal Code, which is by which the code contains an extensive articles prohibiting sexual violence against children. The Penal Code also contains articles banning physical and psychological harm of children. Furthermore, in they have also the Children and Parents Code, where they amended in the year of 1979, where it includes the ban of physical punishment as well as the humiliating treatment of children. Additionally, Sweden is also the first country ever to ever introduce a specific ban on the corporal punishment of children. Now, moving on to Brazil. Brazil has a legislation which establishes comprehensive child protection systems, and it is done so under the law known as Law 13.431, whereby they are required to safeguard the rights of child victims and witnesses of violence. The law also ushers the federal government, states, and local governments to develop comprehensive and well-coordinated policies to secure children's right to freedom from violence in all settings, including that of the home and as well as the family. The law also recognizes the right of the child to access information and legal representation to participate in decisions affecting he or she, and for protection from re-victimization, and to benefit from reparation and relevant support services. And lastly, this law also establishes accessible, safe, confidential, and child-friendly reporting, counseling, and complaint mechanisms for child victims and as well as victims of violence. And this recognizes the right of the child to be listened by a well-trained professional and in a child-friendly environment. And with that, I pass on the presentation floor to my fellow groupmate. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Fatima and I will be explaining to you related theories regarding childhood abuse. Many studies had carried out highlight that traumas experienced during the childhood can develop insecure attachment style, which not only impairs emotional regulation but also fosters negative views of self and others, which then interfering with social functioning and can contribute to poor mental health. First one is attachment theory. It was proposed by John Bowlby in 1969, where he stated that the survival of humans, especially human infants, it is best assured to keep them in close proximity with an attachment figure. In this case, parent or parents, because proximity is initially accomplished through complementary maternal and infant's patterns of behavior. For example, infant signals for crying tend to universally attract mothers into closer proximity. So these infant behaviors tend to be elicited by allowing situations such as being left alone with strangers or by internal discomfort or pain. There is a classification system involving 1 secure and 3 insecure types. Those with secure attachment type generally received a reliable caregiving in their childhood. They had a positive view of self and others and did not encounter any problems in depending on other people. On the other hand, people with this missing type of attachment may tend to have received unresponsive caregiving, which leading to consider themselves as self-sufficient due to not being able to rely on other people. The third one is individuals with preoccupied attachment type. They report having had caregivers who did not respond to their requirements in a consistent manner. Since preoccupied individuals are never sure whether or not they would get what they need, they either become attentive or clingy when it comes to getting support from other people. However, individuals with a fearful type of attachment, they tend to have rejecting experiences with caregivers, which leading to images of both self and others. Hence, they usually tend to alternate between approaching to avoiding other people in order to get close to them. The second theory is resilience theory. It is a very simple concept where the capacity of a dynamic process adapting successfully to disturbances that threaten a child's function and development. Basically, in human development, when the operation of basic adaptation system was protected or in good order, children don't usually have problems overcoming extremely harsh conditions, let's say child abuse. But if those systems were impaired during child development, then the risk for developmental problems become much higher, because trauma and negative life experiences like child abuse can drain that resiliency unless they have a way to fill it back through self-care or therapies, which cost a lot of money. They can run out of resiliency quite easily and they become unable to cope with daily life.
Next, we'll take a look on the causes of child abuse. Why do some people hurt children and even have the heart to do so? There's actually no reasonable explanation or simple answer for certain adults or even parents to abuse children. Most of the time, the reasons for child abuse are usually too complex to comprehend and wrap our heads around, because being abused as a child is the worst thing that could ever happen. Parents who abuse their children often see abusing children as a form of teaching and the child to be disciplined, when the fact that it could just cause trauma and fear. Those parents may have experienced abuse as a child in their own families, which could have caused them to develop an insecure attachment style as they grow older. Child abuse can be caused by several reasons. The first one is domestic violence. Parents who abuse their children usually due to a strong feeling of wanting to release their pent-up anger and frustration from any reason on their child by using physical violence. Children who grow up in homes where domestic violence is common are more likely to become victims of abuse themselves. Not only that, men who abuse their wives are also the main reason for the abuse of their children. Next, we'll take a look on the second reason of child abuse, which is alcohol and drug abuse. Child abuse can be caused by parents who have a history of alcohol and drug misuse. Drug and alcohol addiction and even gambling problems may deeply affect a parent's ability to meet their child's needs. Substance addiction dependence is one of the leading causes of child maltreatment and abuse, which includes physical abuse and purposefully neglect the child. Also, alcohol and drug abusing parent is more likely to initiate child abuse with kids of 5 years old or below. Lack of parenting skills is also one of the crucial causes of child abuse. Most parents are naturally gifted while caring for their children, but few may not be able to manage their physical and emotional needs adequately. Parents may not know how to care for their children or may believe it is acceptable to use excessive physical force to discipline or punish a child and often claim that using physical violence is a form of educating and disciplining the child. And lastly, stress and lack of support. When caregivers or parents are stressed, many children are subjected to psychological abuse. It's challenging for parents to deal with a child's emotional demands, especially when they're in a stressful circumstance. Financial pressures, job worries, medical problems, or caring for a family member with a disability are commonly being the reasons for their rising stress levels. High stress levels also can lead to parents having a hard time to deal with their children's emotional needs. Divorce and relationship problems can cause parents to inflict abuse on the child as well.
To address the issue of childhood abuse affecting the educational aspects of the victims, we must first address the core issue, which is the childhood abuse. Legal interventions must be carried out in order to investigate on potential suspects in neglectful and abusive perpetrators. In Malaysia, Polis Diraja Malaysia Jabatan Siasatan Jenayah, Division 11, Sexual Domestic Violence, Child Abuse Investigation Division, is a police division that specifically handles criminal cases that involve children and sexual crimes. Furthermore, the Domestic Violence Act 1994 was enacted to serve as a platform for the victims to seek protection, assistance, and justice. Protection and assistance here refers to the support service offered to the victims in both short and long terms. These services include psychosocial and medical support, housing, legal and financial assistance. Most importantly, to provide the assistance based on the victim's rights and dignity. It is also important for Child Protective Service to frequently check on past child abuse victims on their well-beings. Other than legal interventions, another important intervention should be paid attention to is the psychological and counseling services to the victims. In Malaysia, PTRM Division 11 provides free counseling to the victims. There is also Helpline for Children, Childline 15999, operating 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The One-Stop Crisis Center (OSCC) to provide immediate medical care for victims, and if it is necessary to have the Child Welfare Services to intervene, which is the Majlis Kebajikan Kanak-Kanak Malaysia. In terms of treatments, the treatment should be directed at the psychosocial problems of the victims. Treatments should be based on empirical studies and clinical research. Case studies offer an insight on behavioral interventions in both individual and group treatments for the victims. They tend to emphasize the exploration and expressions of feelings to help decrease the feelings of fear and anxiety, as well as the change of underlying thoughts, patterns of attribution of responsibility. Expressive art therapy is also a good approach to tap into a person's sensory and memory, thereby allowing survivors to explore and process their past trauma when they find it hard to verbally express themselves. Incorporated with other trauma-based treatments such as EMDR and CBT, it can help victims to cope with their past trauma, thereby limiting its impact on the victim's education aspects.
So we have come to the conclusion of this video presentation. Child abuse and neglect is a very serious social issue that can cause deep-rooted scars within a child that can last for life and affect them in many areas. In fact, it is very highly likely that these scars will carry on with them into their adulthood, and the cycle of abuse will continue on from there. Therefore, as members of society, we must strive to ensure that our children receive the needs that they rightfully deserve in terms of their happiness and well-being. And additionally, we also must do our part to put an end to this vicious cycle of abuse, and that we must do so to ensure the harmony and stability of future generations of children to come. And with that, we end our video presentation. Thank you for watching. Bye.